Nearly 1 year ago, I released my most popular video, The Problems with One Piece Live Action. Feedback was largely positive, and there was plenty of discussion in the comments. Lots and lots of discussion. There were some really good points that I missed, some counter-arguments, and, well, some things that I think weren't entirely correct. So, with a year to simmer and a 12-part series all about the East Blue under my belt, I think it's time to return and take another look at more issues with the One Piece live-action adaptation, Community Edition. First and foremost, this is a part 2, so if you haven't seen the first part, go watch that. I don't plan on readdressing what I thought were some of the major issues of the live action that I've already covered, the topics of which I'll throw up on the screen. See? That stuff is already being covered. Alright, good. Second, when I address issues, I do so with a focus on writing. I don't think it's constructive to give a new show, yes, even one based on a well-loved and globally popular property, feedback that essentially is, throw more money at it. I don't love how Arlong looks, I'm sad Moo Moo the Sea Cow wasn't there, but an unproven first season of a Netflix show, one that I will give credit to for putting some good effort into the set designs, though not having the budget to perfectly capture the scope and wonder of the originals is a shame, but I fell in love with One Piece because of the writing, not the looks. Third and finally, because this point was lost on the speed watches last time, I don't hate the live action adaptation, and I'd even dare say that it was a good show. But, and it's a big but, I don't think it's good One Piece. The show being good and not being good One Piece aren't mutually exclusive. I enjoy the film Edge of Tomorrow and it's based on the manga All You Need Is Kill. I think it's a great movie, but it's a subpar All You Need Is Kill adaptation at best. The reception of people who don't know One Piece shows that, despite the misgiving us fans may have, people enjoyed it. And as many comments said, they, or people they knew, watched the adaptation and that led them to read One Piece or watch the anime. And I think we should all agree that that is a good thing. Though I sincerely hope they rewatch or reread the first 90-odd chapters to find out what they missed. Heck, I got into One Piece from the original 4Kids adaptation when I was a kid, so I can't be throwing stones over here. So with those three things in mind, let's dive into those discussions. Okay, we're starting off with what I think was one of the most discussed things I missed, when Nami just started stealing stuff from Kaya, or as William put it, Nami might be a thief, but she only steals from pirates. But in the live action, she blatantly robs Kaya. For me, that is a complete bastardization of her character. And as Luciana said in another comment, I dropped the live action when Nami invaded the marine base to steal from them. Manga Nami would never do that. She has the philosophy of only stealing from pirates because they are bad guys. At the time, she had nothing against the Marines. Her mother was a Marine. Some counterpoints were, Nami tried to steal ancestral gold from the Shandians. Her goodbye to her home village was pickpocketing the entire population. Now, I went into this in my part 10 of The Point of East Blue, so I'll try to be brief in my rebuttal to the rebuttal and summarize what I said in the video. First off, even if it was completely at face value, which I don't believe it is, Nami stealing from her village is after she has officially and confidently joined Luffy's crew. Whether you want to chalk it up to her losing her hatred of pirates and going full pirate, and thus now being alright stealing from civilians, even giving full benefit of the doubt that it's a simple heel turn, which I don't think it is, even if that were all true, she still wouldn't have stolen from the Marines or from Kaya. Especially not from Kaya. Oh, I should also clarify, I only go off the content of the manga. Whatever anime Nami was doing isn't canon. To go into more detail and to summarize my part 10 point, the reason Nami does not steal from civilians is because she knows what it's like growing up in poverty and not having money when you need it most. When a pirate comes and says your money or your life, that if she took their money away, then it could indeed cost them their lives, just as it cost Nami's mother hers. That's why I think her stealing the villagers' wallets isn't just a simple act of thievery. Putting aside the 97 million she saved up and Arlong's storage of treasure she left behind, making her stealing the wallets pretty much a drop in the bucket, her stealing the wallet serves two purposes. Number one, it shows her village that she's able to be her carefree self again, since when she was younger, before Arlong came to the village and forced the 100 million berry burden on Nami, which isolated her from the village, she stole from the villagers. And number two, it's her telling the village that they don't need to worry about money anymore, that they no longer need to pay Arlong's tribute, that they're free from having their lives be dependent on how much money they have. I go into more detail in the video, so if you want more detail, go check it out. Also, on an additional note on Kaya specifically, when Luffy, Zoro, and Nami arrive on the island in the manga and Usopp suggests that Kaya may be able to get them a ship and Luffy is keen on pursuing that chance, Nami explicitly does not want to. She hears that Kaya is an orphan much like herself, and my interpretation is that due to that, Nami doesn't want to take advantage of Kaya in any way. So I'd have to say I agree that at this point in the story, Nami would never have stolen from Kaya, and it is a bastardization of her character. It's up for discussion whether her participating in stealing gold from the Shandians was out of character. I think it was more Luffy's idea anyway, but during the East Blue, no chance. Something that several people pointed out is Luffy's line in the live action, or as Dellinger put it, I hate how often they say this "I'm a different kind of pirate" line, especially from Luffy. Pirates are pirates, not a single one, not Luffy, not Whitebeard, not Shanks, not a single one of the good pirates ever attempt to other themselves away from the bad pirates. I love referring to the very first chapter of One Piece when this comes up, because Dellinger is correct, but I'll add a bit more context. Luffy at the start of his journey is modeling his pirate life off of Shanks and his crew. His pirating philosophy is entirely shaped by the man who saved his life and the lessons he and his crew passed down to him. Sure, Luffy eventually grows into his own pirate later down the line, but in the East Blue he is imitating Shanks as best he can, though with about 1% of the brain power. So when Shanks' first mate tells Luffy that Shanks need to do pillaging and hostage-taking, Luffy doesn't take an issue with that. It's the reason why in the manga, when Usopp's village is about to be overrun, Luffy doesn't think about stopping them, he only thinks about getting meat before the butcher leaves. It's just what pirates do. Luffy doesn't see an issue with that. Or, as I discovered and continuously brought up, Luffy is kind of a selfish jerk. Whenever he does get involved and tries to stop what we the readers would consider villains, it's always because Luffy has a personal investment in the situation, normally because he's taken a shine to someone involved. Luffy only stops Kuro because he likes Usopp, he protects the Baratie because that's how he'll pay off his debt to Zeph, and he saves Nami's village because Nami asked him to help her. So Luffy saying he's a different kind of pirate in the live action? Well, he isn't. It's not in his nature to pillage and murder, for sure, he's more into pirating for the being free and having an adventure part, but Luffy is very much a you do you sort of guy. He'll take personal animus towards individuals, like Kuro for example, but he says it like, I won't become a pirate like you, not I'm a different kind of pirate. He recognizes Kuro is a pirate, just not the kind of pirate he wants to be. Versus what Luffy says when confronting Kuro in the live action, being a pirate isn't about raiding villages. Well, tell that to Shanks. Now, if I want to be super charitable, I could say that this was referencing the Proto-Luffy in Wanted and the whole concept of Peace Mains and Morganeers, who are literally defined as different kinds of pirates, but this is supposed to be a One Piece adaptation, not a Wanted adaptation. I really like this line from With Elisa. You narrowed in on the appropriate plot beats here, but for me, even the characters themselves were hollowed out by the cynical, snarky Western media melon baller. One Piece is a laugh tale, not a smirk tale. And I think that's a pretty valid point, and I find the term smirk tale pretty funny. So let's go through and compare our main cast to their manga counterparts. I already covered some differences last time in the writing department, but let's find some specific examples and rank them on the snark scale. Luffy. I covered a lot of what bugged me about Luffy in my Luffy does not sneak section last video, summed up with the line, Luffy would not sneak via a sewer to talk to Zoro. He would, and does, bold as anything, climb the fence and talk to him face to face, because that's what Luffy does. And after going through the East Blue manga, I have to say that Luffy is too nice. He's a bit too kind, a bit too understanding, a bit too sweet. I said it a moment ago, but Luffy is a jerk. He's got this underlying selfishness that isn't there in the live action. They, for the most part, got Luffy's lack of social acumen more or less correct, though I'm not sure he'd stand on the table as much as he'd just yell it from across the table, but intentionally or not, he's lacking a, quite frankly, violent edge, which may be an issue when adapting the Alabaster arc. I struggle to see this Luffy quick to turn to violence when confronted by the residents of Drum Island, which means he loses his teachable moment from Vivi. He's too nice, he thinks about others too much, he's too much of a traditional good boy protagonist. Then when Zoro gets injured, he seems antsy, starts looking like he's doubting himself, and that's certainly not something Luffy would do. But Snark-wise, Luffy is actually the anti-Snark. He's almost oblivious to the Snark of others, which I think is appropriate, so I'll give him a 1 on the Snark scale. Zoro. The things that bothered me about Zoro that I mentioned last time was the fact that he wasn't immediately loyal to Luffy following the battle against Axe-Hand Morgan. The fact that he repeatedly and continuously says, "Not a crew." In the first video and in the East Blue series, I outlined that Zoro's word is the most important thing to him. Yes, the most important. He is all about his pride as a swordsman, and he can only have that pride because he will never break a vow. The only reason he tries to become the world's greatest swordsman is because he vowed to Kuina, and the only reason he joined Luffy's crew is because he promised Luffy he would. But that's already been covered. What else is wrong with Zoro's character? I think it's the fact that he's stuck in serious mode. Don't get me wrong, Zoro does have a serious mode. Zoro often stands on business, and in those moments he's super cool, but he's not that all the time. I think that's the problem with Zoro's most memorable moments in the manga being when he's in serious mode. The nothing happens, the I give you my thankses. If you need to quickly summarize a character, you'll lean on those iconic moments. That and his alcoholism. But the Zoro that I know, that many One Piece fans know and love, he's a little goofy. It's that contrast between his serious battle mode when he puts on the bandana and when he's being a silly dude getting lost and reacting in an outsized way. I remember seeing a chart of Act Smart and Is Smart and the One Piece crew on it, and Zoro was high on the Act Smart side and very low on the Is Smart. That's what makes him fun. So when live action Zoro is stoic and cool all the time, well, how do you write non-battle dialogue in these moments? How do you capture Zoro when he's supposed to be in a relaxed environment if he's stuck with his not relaxed attitude? Unfortunately, you do have to add Snark. You have to make him a bit more snooty, a bit more eye-rolling, a bit less casual Zoro. There's the previously mentioned not a crew, but it's also him being aboard the ship, visiting Kaya and when they're in the Baratie. What I'm hoping for Season 2 is that they'll add a bit more emotional range to Zoro's character. While not having Zoro fully committed to the crew was a big mistake for the Season 1, maybe he can afford to relax now that he's fully on board being a Straw Hat crew member. I really want to see this more I'm kicking your ass and having a great time while doing it Zoro that we see at Whiskey Peak in the manga. It's an uninjured Zoro knowing he's so much stronger than the bounty hunters is up against, but finding the numbers entertaining. I want to see him smiling while he's fighting. I want him to be able to talk loudly, not just grumble in a low voice. But as for Season 1, he gets a 5 on the Snark scale. What really locked that in was when I watched the scene of him, Usopp and Luffy in Kaya's mansion, and every single line out of his mouth is a snarky response. It's far too much. Nami. Nami. I think one of the most complex characters of the East Blue Saga of the manga. Funnily enough, I think what has been one of the best bits of acknowledgement of what makes Nami great is the recent One Piece fan letter episode. That little girl who recognizes that Nami may not be the strongest crew member, but she uses her smarts to navigate through difficult situations. And what I'd add onto that is that Nami is someone with an incredibly strong will. Her East Blue characterization is someone who's had to deceive others for the last 8 years, living a life of betrayal, hiding her feelings, and having no one other than herself to rely on. She has strong principles and an unmatched sense of responsibility, bearing a burden of 8 years in order to save her village. Her greatest character moment in the East Blue is when she finally lets go of her burden and gives it to Luffy, leaving not only her life but the life of her village in his hands. This moment is treated as a great victory, a moment of growth. She has changed because she trusts Luffy. In the live action, well, she joins the crew in their walk to Arlong Park and she joins in Luffy's fight against Arlong. She hasn't handed over her burden completely. She doesn't trust Luffy to get the job done himself. I just don't get the level of depth from live-action Nami. Perhaps it's an unfortunate fact that Nami is the only female crew member, so as per modern sensibilities, she had to be modified in a way that made her a little more strong, make it so that she doesn't have to be rescued, make it so that she isn't quite so reliant. Live-action Nami also hasn't had these very personal, one-on-one moments with Luffy that deepen their relationship. Chocho isn't there, Gaimon is skipped, and Luffy's fight with Kuro plays out completely differently. All moments when Nami observes a side of Luffy that she doesn't expect to see in a pirate, moments that develop her trust in him. Nami in the manga is a bit snarky, but it's classic Japanese comedy straight man reaction snark, which, to give the benefit of the doubt to the live action, I don't think it translates to English particularly well. It's also the issue where all the brief in-between moments of arcs are whittled down into snarky Zoro and Nami conversations, when in the manga these are the moments when Nami shows off her competency, her ability to sew, basic medical/nutritional knowledge, recognizing the usefulness of an island from a glance, knowing what kinds of crew members they need, recognizing the shortcomings of their ship to take on the Grand Line. It was pure luck that Luffy and Zoro made it to Orange Town without starving to death, and it was all Nami that got them anywhere else. It's an unfortunate staple of modern writing tropes that very competent women, or at least women that writers want to portray as competent, often show their competency through snark, but also, I'm not sure what the alternative is. Nami's violence towards the crew is played for laughs because of One Piece's art style, but I'm not sure Nami stabbing Luffy with a needle in live action would play the same, even if her propensity for violence is an inherited trait from Bellemere. Even with those reasons in mind, I also have to give Nami a 5 on the snark scale. Nami's snark doesn't have to go, but it's far, far too frequent. Take the scene when Sanji is serving Nami. In the manga, she's flirtatious, nice, she's manipulating Sanji to maximize what she can get out of him. In the live action, she's just her same snarky self. There's no range, it's all snark all the time. Usopp. Usopp is... man, what do I even say? Usopp is different. All his defining moments from his introductory arc are pretty much stripped away. His defining fight in Arlong Park is a shadow of its former self. The utter lack of the Usopp pirates means we don't get to see his qualities as a leader. In a truly destructive move, Usopp runs away when he knows Kaya is in danger. Usopp is a coward, yes, but he only runs away when it's only himself at risk. When he needs to protect someone, Usopp is incredibly brave. This is what makes Usopp so admirable, that even when his legs are shaking in fear, he will face down what threatens others, to protect even people he doesn't know. Even his lies are a bit off to me. Usopp's lies are his way of dreaming, his way of pretending to be the person he wants to be. It's his way of building himself up even when he's constantly tearing himself down. In the live action, Usopp's lies are... I couldn't put my finger on it, but they just felt off. And I think the reason for that is that live action Usopp is too charismatic. He's a bit too confident and charming. When he's talking, I feel like I'm getting seduced, and that's not how Usopp is supposed to make me feel. He's supposed to be a loser. His lies are supposed to be very obvious that rarely fool anybody, and then a single person will believe him and that's played for laughs. But is Usopp snarky? I don't think so. What he says that comes close to being snark is well within his character, and it's fairly infrequent, so I'll actually put Usopp at a 2 on the snark scale. Sanji. My boy, look how they massacred my boy. If by massacred I mean made him very attractive, charming, and lovely to be around. Which is the problem. Sanji should be snarky, he should be a sarcastic ass, but stunningly, especially when compared to Zoro and Nami, he's not. Oh, he's lovely. He's just so nice, but he shouldn't be. Sanji is kind, but he isn't nice, unless you're a woman. Like, sure, he's rude to Zeph, that's a given, but the rest of the Straw Hats, like, during Zoro's recovery scene, he's being an absolute sweetheart. I'm watching the 4 episodes he's in and I just can't find it. Maybe a little sass when he's fighting with Zoro against the fishmen. I can't find the sarcasm, the snark, the eye-rolling comments. If I put Sanji on the snark scale, he'd barely be a 2, but if I compare him to what he should be at, he's like a 0. I think the last 2 characters that contribute to the show's snarkiness are Garp and Buggy. Garp shouldn't be snarky at all, though I voiced all my complaints about live-action Garp last part. And Buggy shouldn't be too snarky. He's more of a showman, he's bombastic and over the top, but in the live action, especially when he's just ahead, he's a bit too sarcastic. I can't imagine this snarky Buggy becoming friends with Gaimon. So, is it Snark Piece, a smirk tale? I think yes, but not to the extent that Witherlisa suggests. The main perpetrators are Zoro and Nami, and unfortunately, aside from Luffy and Kobe, they'd get the bulk of the screen time, so it really grates on you when it's just a 2-on-1 sarcastic back and forth with Luffy being the only breath of fresh air. A grim and snarky Garp getting a lot of screen time and an increased Buggy presence also contribute to the air of snarkiness, but when I look at it objectively, it's only 2 out of the 5 Straw Hats that are snarky. It's just that they get most of the screen time, most of the lines, and their snark levels are incredibly relentless. Alright, now we move on to the section where I cover the 2 arcs that I barely covered at all in the original video. I had previously skipped over them since the 2 of them bear barely any resemblance to their manga counterparts. But the comment that actually tipped me over the line into making a part 2 was from Moritz. While I understand why you skipped discussing Syrup Village, it would have been really enjoyable to hear you talk about some of the great moments we missed in that arc. So in thanks, I'm going to go deep on not just Syrup Village, but also Baratie. It also links into several comments about how Usopp and Sanji both felt rushed in joining the crew and didn't have much reason to, and both lacked characterization and important plot beats. So let's rectify that issue rather than saying it's different so it's bad. Go into the important things that were missed because of the changes or detrimental changes made in the live action. The important moments that needed to happen that didn't. Syrup Village is radically different from its manga counterpart. Rather than stopping a pirate invasion, it becomes an escape the mansion story. But the reason why Syrup Village is important is because it's Usopp's introduction, and in the manga it's a very meaty one. We see Usopp's leadership qualities, the things that make others want to follow him. We see his bravery, his quick thinking, his hopes, and the beginning of his dream. We see how he impresses the Straw Hats, how Zoro and Luffy find his bravery admirable, even when Usopp doesn't see himself as brave. There's the defining scene for both Usopp and Luffy, when Usopp, injured, unable to even stand up, seems to embarrass himself in front of the Black Cat crew, trying to protect his Usopp pirate crew, and as the Black Cat pirates laugh at him, Luffy shuts them up and threatens to kill anyone who laughs at Usopp. We see that Luffy respects Usopp and a core of Usopp's character, that it's not about how he looks, how embarrassing or roughed up he may be. There is something in Usopp that'll get him to fight against the odds to protect those he cares about. By the end of Syrup Village, we need a few things from Usopp. We need him to be inspired and motivated to leave the village to pursue his dream. We need him to show that he's willing to put his life on the line to protect others. We need him to show his leadership qualities and how he genuinely cares about others. We need to know how much he admires pirates, admires his father, and sees them as brave warriors of the sea. We need to see his quick thinking and ingenuity. We need to see that Usopp's lies/stories had a positive impact on the lives of those around him, and we need others to acknowledge his bravery while he does not. So how does the live action hit or miss the mark? Well... Oh hey, speaking of wells, I just remembered a comment by Draco Crusher. I still can't get over Zoro's backstory being played to the dynamic, super engaging scene of Zoro struggling to get out of a well. And yes, instead of Zoro's life literally flashing before his eyes as he's about to get shot, it's a motivational flashback for climbing out of a well, in an arc that's supposed to be about Usopp. Strange choice. Alright, no more stalling. I think a good indicator of all the worst things about the changes to Syrup Village is the scene when Usopp is telling everyone the pirates are coming after finding out the truth about Kuro. In the manga, Usopp protects his crew by lying about the threat so they don't get involved, showing his leadership and further showing respect by his crew as they realize he was lying to them to protect them. Then he shows his bravery by resolving himself to stop the pirate invasion, even if he has to do it alone. Then we see how he is respected by Luffy and Zoro for his decision, who acknowledge him. Finally, we see his ingenuity as he plans for the invasion and pre-prepares to give everyone the best chance against superior numbers. In one scene, we hit 4 of the several important checks. In the live action, well, first Kobe hears him and believes him, turning the scene into a scene more about how good Kobe is. Then Usopp says, "I can't do it by myself," which, well, it's a stark difference to Usopp in the manga, who doesn't ask for help and has resolved himself to face the invasion, potentially even alone. Eventually, after a Zoro flashback and after he tries to get Kaya to run away, Usopp finally resolves himself to stay and fight, but it took a while and it certainly wasn't in front of Luffy and Zoro. Kaya doesn't believe him, and then Nami shows up and Kaya believes her. That doesn't just diminish Usopp, but also Kaya's strength as well. In the manga, when Kaya learns about Kuro's betrayal, she, all alone and despite her weakness, makes the journey to the location of the pirate invasion and offers all of her wealth to Kuro to stop him, and then tries to shoot him when that fails. In the live action, she is assisted by Nami to flee and doesn't try to confront Kuro alone. Nami even gives her a pep talk telling her to be strong, but the Kaya I know is strong. Everything's topsy-turvy, everything's wrong. Usopp has barely shown his bravery to protect others, but he hasn't gotten acknowledged. He hasn't shown his ingenuity. He hasn't shown his leadership, though I guess Kobe has. Let's see if the rest of the escape the house scenario fixes these missing pieces. In short, no. Once the chase is on, it's kind of Nami running the show. Usopp gets one blocked shot off on Kuro and then gets knocked down, then he's done. That's it. By the end of the arc in the manga, Usopp is ready to leave the village. He's packed his things and is ready to get onto a tiny boat to face the world alone. He's ready to start his journey to become a brave warrior of the sea. In the live action, he's not ready. He's not leaving. He's standing by watching Luffy and the others receive the going merry. Then Luffy tells him to come with them. Luffy says he saw him stand up for his friends, which is something I'm not sure he actually saw, seeing that he looked unconscious. Then Usopp starts making excuses. I can't leave the village. What about Kaya? I need to look after her. That's not right. By the end of the arc in the manga, Usopp follows the footsteps of his father, leaving behind things that he cares about to pursue his dream. He's resolute, though concerned that if he doesn't leave today, then he won't be able to leave at all. In the manga, Usopp is finally being proactive about pursuing his dream. In the live action, he's being reactive. Kaya convinces him to leave when in the manga she didn't want him to, and the fact that she had feelings for Usopp was much more subtle. By the end of Syrup Village in the live action, we haven't seen Usopp's leadership, we haven't seen the positive effects of the stories he's told, we don't see his ingenuity and his creativity. Luffy seems to have gained respect for him somehow, but Zoro hasn't at all. The only glimmer of Usopp's bravery we see is when he stays with Kaya when she doesn't run away with him, and even that, it doesn't strike me like his speech about protecting his village. Even if they chase him away, even if he gets shot, he loves his village and will protect it. It's such a good moment. Versus, I'll stay here with you until I know you're safe. It just doesn't hit the same. Whenever Usopp's in danger, he shouts that he's a brave warrior of the sea, willing that reality into existence. I don't recall him saying it once in the live action during this arc. You can adjust the writing to fix these things. I get why they didn't have the budget for a full Black Cat pirate invasion and went for an Escape the Mansion storyline. On my follow-up viewings of the episodes, I actually don't have an issue with the change of setting. What matters to me is that the depth of the characters I love are maintained. I ended up writing an alternative version of the whole night in the mansion scenario, one that was focused on Usopp and made sure to hit more of his important character notes, but it was a little too long to fit into this script, so I'll probably release it in a separate video sometime. Alright, that's the meat out of the way, but what about the little things that bugged me personally? Number 1, Luffy says that a ship is part of the crew, and that's not East Blue Luffy. We all know and we all love the Going Merry, and she becomes part of the crew for sure, but the Luffy that has that sentiment wouldn't do all of this to her. Number 2, Nami actually plans to steal a ship. Another case of live-action Nami stealing from civilians. Number 3, Zoro gets knocked out by a wine bottle when he's in fight mode. The Zoro that was spatially aware enough to intercept Usopp's shot got snuck up on and knocked out. Right. Number 4, in Usopp's flashback in the manga, he mentions the Wonder Medicine in a land across the ocean. It's this lie that elucidates that it's through lies that Usopp dreams. And in the live action, it's just, Dad will come back and you'll get better. That's not what Usopp wants. He wants his father to come back, and to take Usopp and his mother out to sea with him. Number 5, Zoro doesn't cry when making his declaration. In his flashback, which shouldn't be here, but because it is, I have to mention it, Zoro doesn't cry when Kuina dies. He cries when he makes his heartfelt declaration. It's supposed to be mirrored when Zoro cries when making his declaration to Luffy that he'll never lose again. We only see Zoro cry, in a non-comedic scene, twice, both when he's making these declarations that he centers his whole life around. In other scenes when the entire crew are ugly crying, Zoro is just standing there stoically watching. I think that's all I've got time to say about the changes to Syrup Village. I could certainly say a whole lot more about how big a hole the lack of the Usopp pirates leaves in Usopp's characterization, but I've been going on a bit too long. After all, there's one more arc that needs to be addressed. The Baratie. I've heard since creating that first video that the One Piece live action was supposed to be 10 episodes and Netflix forced it to be 8, which necessitated some cuts to certain arcs. I think that statement is nowhere as obvious as during the Baratie arc. An arc that's supposed to be about introducing our boy Sanji instead becomes about Zoro and Nami. Yes, Zoro's fight with Mihawk is a very important part of the Baratie arc, but in the manga it's only 2 chapters of about 25. Nami stealing the Merry and heading off to Arlong Park is a few pages amongst that, mainly shown in flashback. The rest is about Sanji and Luffy. I actually touched on a lot of Mihawk's portions last time, my main complaint being that Sanji, in the live action, does not see Zoro fight Mihawk, which is an actual integral part of him being inspired to follow his dream. But what about everything else about the arc? What about Sanji's introduction? Sanji's introduction in the manga, much like Usopp's, is full of detail if you look for it. We see how much of Sanji's character is defined by Zeph, both directly and indirectly. The direct ways are the dishes Sanji knows how to cook, the way that he fights, his foul mouth. Then there are the indirect things. Sanji's picked up smoking because he wanted Zeph to see him as a man. Sanji's unable to properly express his feelings because he learned either directly or indirectly from Zeph's ideal of how a man is supposed to act. Sanji is craving recognition from the man that saved his life, and Zeph is emotionally incapable of giving it. The story of Sanji in the Baratie is the story of a man who thinks that living a life for someone is to live a life in service to them. But by the end of the story, Sanji, though still filled with gratitude for Zeph, decides that he'll live for Zeph by living a life that Zeph wants him to live, to follow his dreams. I don't want to belabor the point, but it's just that important. It's an absolute core to Sanji's character that, even though the two on the surface don't appear to get along, he deeply cares about Zeph and has been molded by his upbringing by him. Then there are the other things we learn about Sanji, that despite his sarcastic and stoic demeanor, he is bursting with emotion and with passion. We learn that he is kind, so much so that his genuine kindness can change a demon. We also learn that he doesn't have much regard for his own life, though the roots of that lack of self-preservation won't become obvious for years to come. The other important thing about Sanji's story during the Baratie is that we see him shift. He starts the arc having given up on following his dream and feeling so indebted to Zeph that he wants to cook for him until Zeph dies. He's even willing to die to protect Zeph's treasure, even for a few extra seconds. By the end, he has been inspired by Zoro and also by Luffy, which, along with overhearing Zeph, finally gives him the push he needs to venture out to pursue the All Blue. So, do we learn even a smidgen of this from the live action? There was a reason that a bunch of comments complained about Sanji joining the crew in the live action, such as Luke Isabel, who corrected me originally on putting most of the weight on Sanji's inspiration on Zoro when Luffy was also a big part of inspiring Sanji during the fight with Don Krieg. Let's start from the start, and immediately we see Sanji threatening Zeph that he'll leave if he can't cook. That's a far cry from "I'll cook here till you die," and it's because he cooks something that Zeph says they don't cook. So, something Zeph wouldn't cook? That shouldn't be the case. Sanji on the Baratie can only cook what Zeph cooks. Zeph's cooking is the only thing Sanji knows. That's two strange things. Let's move on to his conversation with Luffy, where he just starts talking about the All Blue, how his dream is to go there one day. Hang on, what? Hang on, hold up. What? These are not the words of a man who has repressed his own dream. This is not the man who would shout out to Zoro, "Abandon your stupid dream." Also, as Seg Pasta points out, Sanji is not smiling nearly enough as he talks about it. Gin thankfully bursts in and interrupts the conversation. Gin is actually a core part of showing off Sanji's character and what Sanji's life could have become. While Sanji eventually learns to live for Zeph by pursuing his own dream, Gin ends up dedicating his life to Krieg, saying that Krieg's dreams have become his own. Gin is a tool of the narrative to show us more about Sanji. So first we see Sanji cook the meal, and while I don't fully agree with Dellinger's take that live-action Sanji only did it to spite Zeph, he does state that if a man is hungry, I feed him, good on you live-action. There is an element of that in the scene which shouldn't be there. After Gin warns Luffy about the Grand Line, which is accurate enough to the manga, he's gone. The next most important character to Zeph to help us understand Sanji disappears almost as soon as he's introduced, something Dellinger did get completely right. Gin's complexity is gone. But this isn't about Gin, this is about Sanji. There's still time to cover our bases. Except we don't see Sanji for the rest of the episode because it becomes the Zoro and Mihawk show, and I repeat, Sanji does not see their duel. We next see Sanji prepping veggies with Zeph, and then cooking for the Straw Hats as Zoro recovers from his fight, and like I said before, he's just far too lovely. Then once again, out of the blue, Sanji delivers his flashback, and while I think the flashback itself is a fine adaptation, hitting the key notes, though we don't see Zeph diving into the water to save Sanji, and he punches child Sanji, which is literally inconceivable, it's just delivered so casually. In the manga, we see Sanji's flashback when he's ready to die for Zeph. It's a massive reveal as to why he's willing to throw his life away because, in his mind, he took everything from Zeph. And maybe his life can pay for even a small portion of it. In the live action, it's just, oh, how did you two meet? Ah, well, here's my tragic backstory. It's like Zoro climbing out of the well all over again. That, and it's spun into a weird story about being a captain, which doesn't fit at all. The flashback is to show how far Zeph was willing to go to save a boy who shared his dream, not Zeph ate his leg because captains make difficult decisions. Then instead of Sanji talking about giving up on dreams, because we've already seen that his is alive and well, it's a conversation between Luffy and Nami, who is still around, and it's just live-action Nami's story cannibalizing the stories of other characters. And then Arlong shows up. We're running out of time. Do we hit any more of Sanji's character beats? When Zeph gets beaten up, Sanji does cry out his name, so I guess we do get to see that he does actually care about him. Then Sanji saves Luffy from drowning and... Oh my, give me a second. Whew. The conversation between Zeph and Sanji tries to speedrun all of their interactions from the manga. It's the point from the first video, but it's wholly lacking in subtlety. Though, to its credit, it does more or less sum up the Sanji-Zeph dynamic. Sanji feels obligated to stay because he owes Zeph his life. Zeph doesn't want him around so Sanji can pursue his dream. It lacks all the nuance from the manga, it lacks the important moments like when Zeph punches Sanji and wastes Sanji's food, showing how much Zeph is willing to betray his ideals in order to get Sanji to pursue his dream, and it certainly lacks the build-up of the manga. And that's it. Sanji joins the crew, he's smiling and happy instead of looking like he's ready to kill a man in the manga. His goodbye to Zeph is... You know what, it's close enough. It's missing Zeph's "a man takes his leave quietly" line and Luffy's smile. I posited that Luffy knew this goodbye needed to happen and was reluctant to set sail with Sanji until it was said, but live-action Sanji's ugly crying face is actually what we needed. But if we go back to the things we need to learn about Sanji, we've missed a lot. I'm not entirely sold on the Sanji's character is defined by Zeph part. The differences in their cooking, they make a point to stress that Zeph uses a lot of oregano while Sanji doesn't, actually works against this point. Sanji tells Luffy about Red Leg Zeph, but we don't see him do any kicking, so it's not obvious that Sanji is using his techniques, or the ideology as to why he only kicks. We do get to see that Sanji legitimately cares about Zeph when we see him get injured, though it's quite limited when compared to manga Sanji's "I'll die so this place can remain a restaurant even a little longer," but I'll give it a pass. The subtlety-less exchange between Zeph and Sanji both works and doesn't. In the manga, Zeph is too emotionally immature to express his true feelings to Sanji that he couldn't possibly be as honest as live-action Zeph. In the manga, it's Luffy that shouts at Sanji that his life wasn't safe so he could throw it away, a moment that hits harder when we see Luffy thinking about Shanks' sacrifice. But it does work showing that Sanji can't be honest with Zeph, until he breaks down when he finally gets some concern from Zeph, so half points there. We certainly don't see Sanji's self-sacrificial nature. He doesn't really have a chance to show it. We don't really see that Sanji is bursting with emotion, though again, credit to the farewell scene. We do see his kindness though, as I said before in the character section, he's too nice. But we don't see the fruits of that kindness unfortunately, as Gin disappears altogether. And unfortunately, we don't see the arc. In the live action, from the start, Sanji is still holding onto his dream, and unfortunately, that's why it doesn't seem as though he has a reason for joining Luffy. Sure, Luffy is nice to Sanji, he talks to him about his dream and invites him to his crew, but he hasn't seen what makes the Straw Hats special. He hasn't watched Zoro recklessly pursuing an impossible dream and Luffy supporting it. He hasn't watched Luffy dismantling Don Krieg with his bare fists while Zeph talks to him about grit overcoming steel. The problem with the Baratie story in the live action is that I can imagine any other ship on its way to the Grand Line having a conversation with Sanji about the All Blue, complimenting his food and inviting him aboard, and Zeph having the same conversation with Sanji and Sanji joining them. The reckless pursuit of your dreams, the inspiration of Zoro and Luffy, the things that make the Straw Hat crew stand out from the others, they don't seem to factor into this story. And we're not done. We need to talk about Don Krieg. I'll try to keep it brief, but Krieg existed for a reason which can be subdivided into three. The overarching reason is that Luffy needed to fight Don Krieg. But why? First, so Sanji could be inspired, which I've already touched on. Second, so Luffy could dismantle Krieg's ideology, literally and figuratively. I cover this in depth during part 7, but the skinny of it is that Krieg exists to teach the audience what doesn't succeed on the Grand Line. Krieg is all about things being the key to success. His armada, his weapons and armor, Zeph's logbook. He is obsessed with military might. Then he faces Luffy, who destroys his weapons and shatters his armor, taking him on with his bare hands. This links neatly into the third reason Luffy needed to fight Krieg. So we see what does succeed on the Grand Line. Grit. People that do not give up. Zeph in the manga acts as the experienced Grand Line pirate, and he passes this wisdom on to Sanji as they watch Luffy fight. Grit is stronger than steel. From this fight and from Zeph's commentary, we learn that Luffy does have what it takes to take on the Grand Line, and it's all revealed through his fight with Krieg. So while initially I did find it funny that Krieg got off-screen by Mihawk, all I can unfortunately think about now is that we missed a core theme from the Baratie and character building on Luffy's part. Maybe I'll write an alternative Baratie as well as Syrup Village. With the main points out of the way, here's some additional things that bugged me about the adaptation of the Baratie arc. Number 1. Technically, it's before the crew reached the Baratie, but the same episode, but Nami calls Zoro Luffy's first mate, which, funnily enough, he's not. It's a widely held misconception that Zoro is Luffy's first mate, but the closest thing to a position that Zoro has on the Straw Hat crew is the title of swordsman. The Straw Hats don't actually have a first mate. Number 2. The Baratie shouldn't have any waiters. It's the whole reason Sanji is on waiter duty in the first place, because all the actual waiters were unable to handle the rough and tumble nature of the Baratie and all jumped ship. Number 3. While the emotions are correct in Zoro's pledge to never lose again, though I'd prefer if he were ugly crying like Sanji did, it's missing the most important line at the end. Got a problem with that, King of the Pirates, showing that this is a pledge to Luffy, and with the context of how important Zoro's word is to him, the importance making such a pledge holds. He doesn't make the pledge in front of Mihawk, which I think is a detrimental change as well. Number 4. Mihawk doesn't smile at the end of his fight, which fails to sell me to the fact that he's actually very excited to have met someone like Zoro. It seems that he too has caught the always frowning swordsman disease. Then again, in the manga, he smiles after hearing the pledge, which in the live action he missed, so consistency, I guess? Number 5. It is nonsense that Luffy knows the Wado Ichimonji's name, and that he's able to pronounce it. Zoro doesn't even know his sword's name until he meets Tashigi. Number 6. Also, Luffy gets hurt when he gets hit by Arlong. Which, what? Luffy's whole thing is that he's immune to blunt blows, sans haki, sea stone, etc. There's several other nitpicks I could make, but I think I'll end my discussion on the Baratie here, because the last relevant thing is put during the Arlong Park arc in the live action for some reason. Mr. Prestige put it best. Also, the scene in which Zeph is saying that Luffy reminds him of Gold Roger. There is nothing Luffy said or did that should remind him of Roger, or rather, the very thing that made Zeph say that was not included. What does Zeph see of Luffy in the live action? Him not paying a bill, breaking dishes, asking for help when Zoro gets injured, and Luffy getting beaten by Arlong up to the point where he gets dragged outside. If that's what makes Luffy resemble Gold Roger in the live action, it certainly does not make the King of the Pirates seem very impressive. Zeph hasn't seen Luffy's grit, his never-give-up attitude. As Mr. Prestige says, there's no reason that Zeph should tell Garp that Luffy reminds him of Roger. Okay, I'm done. I think I'll wrap it up here. I didn't cover nearly as many of the comments as I expected, though I did read most of them. Though let me end by saying this. I'm feeling hopeful. The creators of the One Piece live action do legitimately seem to love One Piece, and I think that since Season 1 has proven very popular, I'm hoping that they'll have a little more wiggle room to do more. I was very heartened to hear that Season 2 will not cover Alabasta. That was one of my biggest fears, that they'd try to cram the entire Alabasta saga into 8 episodes, and it was a relief to know that they would only go up to the end of Drum Island. I don't make this video, or my last one, because I want the live-action One Piece to fail. It's the opposite. I really want it to succeed. If Season 2 was so good at what it covered that I'd choose to watch it over rereading the manga, no one would be happier than me. The more good One Piece content that exists, the better. I guess the last comments I'll cover are the ones aimed at me. The cheeky gotchas of, "Aren't you called We Attempt New Things? Kind of ironic, right?" Well, no. When making anything new, when animating, writing, drawing, when making videos, or when adapting a beloved property, being able to accept criticism is how you improve. That's why I've been trying to make my criticisms constructive. Not that I expect anyone working on the live action to watch my videos. But if even this small sample size of a One Piece community has left this sort of feedback, I think it's important to air it out, and I appreciate all the comments left on the original video that made up the base of this one. Because remember, it's not I attempt new things, it's we attempt new things. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a fruitful day. Oh, and next month I'll release my compilation video of The Point of East Blue, and the month after we'll start the new series, The Grandeur of Alabasta, so look forward to it. Toodles!